In your book about the strategies of war, the second strategy of war that you write about is do not fight the last war. And when I read that, what I understood it to kind of mean was about not being rigid. You know, how does one dismantle the prison of convention that they live in? So for that lawyer or for that person that's working in the financial district who is, 47 and they're a stockbroker and they're miserable, they have somewhat been imprisoned by their own identity, which is like a set of ideas from the past. And I'm really obsessed with how we get out of the way of our own identity so that we can live our most fulfilling lives. Because even me, and probably even you, I've created this perception of who I am, and I'm like following the instructions every day.
Yeah, it's a trap. You can't fall into that. So one of the laws of power that I have, one that I think is very important, I think it's law 25 or 26, I don't remember the number, is recreate yourself. So the moment people start know who you are, they identify, they create your identity. Oh, Robert Greene is this person who writes these dark Machiavellian manipulative books. Then I'm trapped. I'm trapped by their perception of me, and I always have to be like a little dog performing for them, right? And I don't want to fall into that trap. You have to recreate yourself. You have to use your personality and who you are as clay that you are molding. You're like an artist. And so you change yourself. For each person, it's different. So for me, it means I don't write 48 Laws of Power Part 2. I write now a book that's not like the 48 Laws of Power at all. For you, it's doing your podcast, but changing it up. Or maybe you do a different podcast, or maybe you go into a different career set, or maybe you become a CEO or an entrepreneur in a different direction. I was recently on Andrew Huberman's podcast, right? One of the most successful podcasts besides yours in the world. And I don't want to, it's going to sound like bragging, but the book mastery helped him a lot because he was a professor, I believe, at Stanford. I hope I have it right. Everything was going well. He was on a fast track in neuroscience, but he was miserable. He hated the politicking. He hated all the bullshit that you have to go through in academia. And then he read the book and he goes, I don't know how old he was. He must have been in his early 30s. He goes, I don't want to do this. I want to change. I want to recreate myself. He decided to go into podcasting and to take all of his knowledge about science and neuroscience and bring it into a different medium. And so that's extremely powerful because if he had stayed in academia, he would have gone down the path that we're talking about. It sounds a little sexier than being in finance and you're 47, but being stuck in academia when it doesn't fit you with all the nasty politics that go on in universities, et cetera, that is a path for misery if he doesn't fit. So you have to kind of go through this process all the time and not let other people tell you who you are.
In the case of Andrew Huberman, who transitioned from an academic to a podcaster, it's quite a feat because there's lots of forces that try and hold our existing identity in place, a lot of people. And to sort of cross the chasm, get past all of that force that says, no, we want you to stay with us, Andrew. We want you to be an academic. Who do you think you are being a podcaster? That force I'm so intrigued by because everyone, regardless of where they are now, if they're going to try and venture to somewhere else, a better place, they're going to encounter that. How does one work through that? What is that? How do we understand that force that's trying to keep us down?
It usually happens when you're successful that people start giving you these identities that kind of define who you are. And if you're okay with it, that's fine, if it doesn't. But I'm a big believer in listening to your own pain and listening to your own frustration. So when you feel frustrated in life, you have to go through a process. You have to look at it and you have to go, what is the source of it? Normally, the first thing you'll do is you'll blame other people. You'll blame the world. You'll blame your spouse, your children, whatever, right? And you won't really look at what it is, why you're frustrated. And if you look at it deeply enough and you go, I'm really frustrated because I'm not enjoying my work. I'm making money. I'm going there every day and I'm going through the motions and I'm successful and people admire me, but I'm not happy. I'm frustrated. I'm upset. You've got to lean into that pain. You've got to lean into what frustrates you and go, I can't go on another 5 years like this, because the mind and the body are tied in. There's no difference. We're all one. We're all a unity. And so when you start having these frustrations, these desires that you're not acting upon, it creates physical problems. You're not aware of why suddenly your blood pressure is rising, why suddenly your back is having pain like I'm having right now. It's all interconnected. And when you're not doing something that you're not engaged with, your whole being goes out of whack. Everything doesn't work. You've got to listen to it. You've got to understand it. And you've got to go, I want some joy and some excitement in my life. I want a challenge. It takes some fearlessness, because leaving a prestigious job at Stanford, where you've got money, I don't know if he had tenure or not, or perhaps he did. It takes some guts, because you're leaving something that's a convention, that's stable, et cetera, et cetera. But you've got to go, it's not worth the price. It's not who I am. I'm going to suffer for it down the road. And so, let's say he decided to go into podcasting and it failed. All right, so be it. Then he learns that, and he's somebody who's very smart. He would have figured out another direction to go in. If my book, The 48 Laws of Power, hadn't been a success, I don't know what would have happened to me, but hopefully I would have figured out another way to go, because I also had to drop a career direction that I was going in. But you've got to try. You've got to be able to try, and you've got to go say to yourself, it's actually a great thing in your 30s, let's say, to go, I need something new. I need something completely different. I need a new challenge. I'm going to drop this. I'm going to start something. You won't believe the energy that will suddenly rise up in you, right? You'll suddenly feel invigorated. You suddenly feel youthful again. I'm not stuck in this thing. I can try something else.
I'm so intrigued by two things within that. One of them was going back to the case of Andrew, who left Stanford and became a podcaster, was my brain, you said he's an intelligent guy, he would have figured it out if he'd failed. My brain also was saying he could have always gone back. And there's a real illusion sometimes, I think, in most of our lives where we don't realize that if we mess up in this thing, as I think Jeff Bezos calls it, this is probably a type 2 decision where we can walk back through the door. But it's this sort of illusion that we're going to really lose something great if we fail that stops us taking that first step. And the other thing I was curious about is this idea that pain is a catalyst for change. And do people need to get to that point in their lives where they go, oh, I'm just so sick of this to change? Can someone change before they get there?
Unfortunately not. Sometimes the bottom has to drop out before you realize what you really want and what you really need to get in life. I wish it weren't that way. But feeling like you're suffering and that you need a change, and that if you go on this way, bad things are going to happen, is the greatest motivator of all. Because if you're moderately discontented with your job, you're going to constantly be justifying it to yourself, going, it's all right, it'll get better. There'll be a new boss, or I can always move from this job to another company similar. You'll justify, you'll never get out of it. And the trap will just close in on you and you'll never get out of it, right? It's those moments where, damn it, I hate this. I can't go on. I'm heading to suicide. I'm heading to depression. I'm heading to drinking. I'm hitting bottom. I don't like where I'm going. It doesn't have to be quite so drastic. I know I'm exaggerating, but you have to feel a degree of pain and frustration to say, I need to make a major change in my life. The other thing I say is, in the same book you were quoting in about warfare, I have what's called the death ground strategy, where you feel like, so he's going into podcasting, and if you go in with the attitude, well, if I fail, I'll just go scurrying back to Stanford. That's a recipe for failure in itself already. Your attitude is already half-assed. You're already half into it. You go to yourself, I'm cutting my ties at Stanford. If this podcast doesn't work, I'm not going back. It gives you the energy, the motivation, the desire to actually make it successful. But if you're always going through life kind of with half measures, going, well, if I start this business and it fails, I'll go back to living with my parents and I'll do this other job. You're not going to put your full energy into it. You're not going to give all of yourself into it, and it's probably going to fail.
It's really it's so true. It reminded me of something I was reading in one of the psychology journals about a study they did with participants where they asked them to do a puzzle and offered them a delicious snack as the reward. And then in one group, they said, this is the only way to get the snack if you do this puzzle. And then in the other group, they said, by the way, the same snack is also available in the vending machine down the hall. And then the people in the second group, where they had a plan B, were less committed to doing the puzzle, spent less time trying to solve it, and did worse in the puzzle. And it's this idea that a plan B actually psychologically does distract you
Yeah.
from your plan A.
Yeah. We're animals, right? We have a certain nature, which is what I talk about in human nature. And our earliest ancestors, to go back to something I was talking about, our brilliance, the power of our species is we are actually very physically weak compared to like chimpanzees and cheetahs and lions, et cetera, et cetera. But we use our brain, and feeling the necessity, feeling that we're going to die unless we don't solve these problems, right? If we don't use our brains, if we don't create tools, if we don't work together as a team, we're gonna die, or we won't survive, is what makes us inventive. It's what makes us creative. It's almost like a barometric pressure. That's the metaphor I like to use.
What's that?
When you feel that pressure inside of you and it's very heavy, like weather that's very, heavy and thick, you're motivated, you feel it. I've got to get up in the morning. I've got to do this. I've got to accomplish this. When that pressure goes away and you don't feel any pressure in your life, you can do anything and there's no consequences for it. You'll just waste time. You'll waste years. You'll waste months. You'll never accomplish anything. You give somebody a deadline, right? They'll accomplish in 2 months what it would take somebody 2 years to do without a deadline. It's that necessity. It's that sense of there's a sword at my back. I've got to get it done. It makes you get things done. It gives you the energy. It's get rich or die trying, to quote somebody.
You talk about that in the book about the strategies of war. That chapter 4, or strategy number 4, is about creating a sense of urgency and desperation. And when I was reading that, I was thinking, to be fair, I don't know any great leader that isn't a little bit urgent and a little bit desperate. And even if they feign that desperation to galvanize people, there's something about creating urgency and desperation in your life that is an incredible tailwind. Is there any practical ways that you think the average person can create the required sense of urgency in their life so they can get things done?
Well, it's kind of like a level here. So you need challenges in your life. That's sort of what the death ground is about. You're challenged. You better rise up to it. If the challenge is too great, if you're like, I'm 24 and I've never written a book, but I'm going to write the best book ever, you're going to fail because it's too far above you. You're never going to reach it. If it's too low, you're never going to have the energy. It's too easy. It's not going to motivate you. But there's a sweet spot. I don't know. I'm just drawing it here, be like here, where it's a challenge. It's above what you can do right now. It's not so far above that you can't possibly do it, but it's enough of a challenge to mean, God, I better get my act together. I better get the energy to get together. I better, change my habits. I've got to get up earlier. I've got to work harder. It's not like I have to get up at 4 and force myself and work out, et cetera. I can get up at 6:30, an hour earlier, and I'm going to meet this challenge that's a little bit above my level. That's a powerful way of motivating yourself. You need challenges. You need constant challenges in life, or you're gonna stagnate. It's just the law of nature.